So now we're going to do a dissection of a fish. This is a croco, um, and is the scientific name just escaped me. We'll put it in the information on the e-classroom for you to see what the scientific name is. But this is a fairly common marine fish in the Gulf of Paria. I just went out and bought it on Carney Savannah Road, so it's very fresh. Right. So as with all other organisms, the first thing you do when you're trying to dissect or look at a particular system is look at the body, the external body of the organism. Right? So I can make some deductions about feeding, and I could look at some accessory feeding structures on this fish as well. So on the fish, you see that there is this line in the scales, right? This is the lateral line. This is a sensory structure that the fish can use to evade predators and find food. You also have the nares. You see there are these two openings here that are used to sample the water body as it flows, as the fish swims through it. From the position of the mouth, you can also tell where in the water column this fish feeds. So fish that feed up at the surface of the water, their mouths are normally up at the top of their head because they're going at the surface of the water like that. Fishes that feed in the middle of the water column, their mouths are in the middle of their head like this. And fish that feed on the bottom, their mouths are to the bottom of their skulls. Right? So this fish is more accustomed to feeding towards the bottom of the water column. So one thing to note, I mean, the mouth doesn't look that big, but if you were to open it out, you can see that the mouth is actually protrusible. So the mouth of this fish can expand to a great size in order to engulf large bodies, large pieces of food, right? If you were to look down the mouth, you would see that there is a tongue. The tongue, again, is basically to raise and lower the mouth, right? Rather than for tasting and manipulating of food. In fact, there is a species of parasites called Cymothoa exigua, which is an isopod that replaces the tongue in snappers and some other fish, and the fish doesn't even know that its tongue has been replaced because the tongue is not really a gustatory labile movable structure as with our mouths. So what we're going to do again, we're going to make a ventral incision in our fish. So again, if this were an invertebrate, we'd make a dorsal incision, but because it's a vertebrate, we have our backbone that's going to block anything. We're going to make a ventral, a mid-ventral incision cutting down the midline of the belly of this fish. So this again is the cloaca. So again, the cloaca is a shared opening between the urinogenital and the digestive openings, right? So we're going to cut here. And one thing that always surprises me with fish dissections is how little of the abdominal cavity is actually involved, how little of the body of the fish is actually a cavity. So I'm switching to the scalpel because the scissors are a bit dull, so I'm switching to the scalpel here. Okay. Just cutting up this mid-ventral line. That was just to get rid of some scales. You always, when you're doing a dissection, you always want to aim upwards, because if you were to, like if you were cleaning fish and you were cutting down that way, you would rupture a lot of the internal organs. So we're coming up now close to where the fish fins meet this pelvic girdle, We're coming up close to that, so I'll have to switch these scissors there. Right. So this fish has very big scales. So when you buy crow to put in fish broth, etc., you would get it already scaled. Right? Because those scales are pretty big and they would be not very edible. Some fish have small scales that you don't need to worry too much about. But these guys have these big, heavy scales. Right. So I'm here at the pelvic girdle now. And it's going to take a little work to get through this. Because I'm actually going to have to be cutting through bone here. This is a little hard with the scissors. And I want to do this without cutting myself. Because nobody wants to see that happen. That was just cutting through the flesh. Just get the bone. Ouch, that hurts. Right, so I got through the bone. Cutting up now. Right. So at this point, I'm going to cut to display the visceral cavity of this fish. Again, you see there's a lot of connective tissue that's holding everything in place. I want to cut up this way. Most of the body of a fish is muscle for swimming, right? The actual visceral cavity is pretty small compared to the rest of the fish. So immediately with this open, you're seeing the silvery structure. That is something called the swim bladder. That is a structure that helps the fish to remain afloat. So it's not associated with the digestive system, but it's very important for locomotion in the fish. Some muscle. I want to cut through the bone here as well. Ouch. Ow, ow, ow. Okay, so if we were to look at everything in situ here, let me get rid of those scales because they look a little gross. Right, so you have your gills, right? Squirt some water on this guy here. Okay, this is the heart of the fish. So the gills and the heart, right? This is the swim bladder that I'll remove in a minute. This is a flap of flesh attached to the swim bladder. Okay. Right, so swim bladder, gills, heart. These two stripes that you see here are the gonads of the fish. So remember the gonads together with the digestive system open in the cloaca. Why I'm saying gonads as opposed to testes or ovaries, basically in a fish you can only distinguish between testes and ovaries by one of two things. If it is an undeveloped or an immature individual, you basically have to do microscope work to see if it's a testes and ovary. If it's a female that is ready to bear eggs, then this structure is going to be very yellow, very large, very yellow. It'll occupy most of the visceral cavity of the fish, and it'll have a very grainy appearance, right? So this here, I can only say this is either going to be an immature ovary or a testes, right? So there are two pairs of testes. This is the digestive tract running down below here. So what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm going to get rid of this swim bladder. And again, the swim bladder is a structure that's all about flotation. Get my forceps. Tease away the testes. Sorry, I was just muttering to myself. I'm teasing away the testes. Okay. So I've moving the swim bladder away. Okay, so the liver in this fish this here is displayed. The liver in this fish looks not it has a little bit different appearance than what you would see in a shark, for example. This brown structure you see here is the liver. Right? So you have your liver. Up here was the heart. This appears to be a, what is that? This is the gallbladder, right? And then we have our stomach. So our stomach here is this tiny little sac. It's not a very large stomach. It's going to be distendable, so when this fish has fed, the stomach will get larger, right? So the stomach is in the connective tissue here, right? And the stomach it's in a J shape, a kind of a J shape. And then, let me pull this out a little. Right, so I actually cut the intestine a little bit. This is the intestine that's not very differentiated from the rest, into large and small. right? This fish is actually a carnivore, right? Because it has you could tell it's a carnivore because it has a very short intestine and it doesn't have ceci branching from the intestine, right? So you have your stomach, intestine, small intestine, large intestine, and this would connect to the cloaca here, right? So again, this guy is not a herbivore, it's a carnivore because it has a very short digestive system. And then we have our liver up here, right? Some fish actually do have crops as well. Some fish will actually have parts like catfish, the cascadoo, for example. Part of its intestine is going to be thin wall and vascularized, so it could work for acquiring air as well, right? Those are the air-breathing fish. But the gut of a fish is usually not as differentiated as you would see with a land mammal, right? So that is the digestive system of our fish.